For years, the world watched a simmering conflict between Iran and Israel, fought largely through proxies and in the shadows. Covert operations, cyber attacks, and targeted assassinations defined this undeclared war. However, what we are witnessing today, on June 21, 2025, is a dramatic and dangerous departure from that established pattern. The conflict has moved from the clandestine to the overt, from indirect skirmishes to direct state-on-state military confrontation. This shift represents a perilous new chapter for the Middle East, one where the old rules of engagement have been shattered, leaving a volatile and unpredictable vacuum in their place. The international community now holds its breath, questioning whether this escalation is a prelude to a much wider, more devastating regional war. The catalyst for this open warfare was a significant Israeli military operation that began on June 13, 2025. Israeli forces launched large-scale airstrikes targeting the heart of Iran's national security infrastructure. The attacks were aimed at Iran's nuclear facilities, key military bases, and even top-ranking personnel directly involved in its strategic programs. This was not a limited strike, but a comprehensive campaign designed to cripple Tehran's capabilities and, in the words of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, eliminate Iran's nuclear threat. The decision to strike so directly and deeply inside Iranian territory marked a fundamental change in Israeli strategy, abandoning plausible deniability for a clear and public display of force that made a direct Iranian response almost inevitable. In response, Iran did not resort to its usual network of proxy militias across the region. Instead, it retaliated directly, launching its own missiles and drones from its own soil, aimed squarely at targets inside Israel. This directness is what makes the current situation so fundamentally different and alarming. On June 21st, sirens wailed across Tel Aviv as 5 ballistic missiles streaked across the sky, a clear message from Tehran. While intercepted, this attack followed a relentless series of barrages. Since the conflict erupted, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has unleashed hundreds of projectiles, transforming a long-running shadow war into a direct and undeniable exchange of fire between two powerful regional adversaries. The implications of this shift are profound and far-reaching, extending well beyond the borders of Iran and Israel. What was once a calculated, albeit dangerous, game of chess is now a volatile brawl with unpredictable consequences. Every missile launched and every airstrike conducted raises the stakes, pushing both nations further down a path of mutual destruction. The international community, particularly the United States, now faces the immense challenge of de-escalating a conflict that has broken all previous boundaries. The world is watching not just a military confrontation, but the potential unraveling of an already fragile regional stability, with global security hanging precariously in the balance. The defining feature of Iran's recent attacks is not the introduction of some revolutionary new missile technology, but rather the sheer scale and audacity of the operation. Since this direct conflict began on June 13th, Iran has launched approximately 450 missiles and over 1,000 drones toward Israel. This is a massive coordinated effort designed to overwhelm Israel's sophisticated, multi-layered air defense systems. The strategy appears to be one of saturation, to fire so many projectiles simultaneously that even a highly effective defense network like the Iron Dome and Arrow systems cannot intercept them all. This focus on quantity over quality marks a strategic calculation by Tehran to demonstrate its capability and resolve through overwhelming force. The attacks have been relentless. On June 20th, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced its 17th wave of missiles targeting critical Israeli military installations, including the Nevatim and Hatzerim air bases. Just a day later, on June 21st, sirens blared in Tel Aviv as another barrage was launched towards central Israel. While Israeli officials report that the vast majority of these projectiles have been successfully intercepted, the constant threat has placed the entire nation on high alert. Debris from intercepted missiles has still caused damage, such as a fire on a residential building in Tel Aviv. The psychological impact of near-daily air raid sirens and the sight of interceptions lighting up the night sky cannot be understated. This sustained missile campaign is a deliberate show of force, intended to prove that Iran can and will strike back directly when attacked. By targeting military bases and major cities like Haifa, which saw at least 19 people wounded in one such attack, Iran is signaling that no part of Israel is beyond its reach. This is a stark departure from its previous reliance on groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen to carry out attacks. This time, the return address is clearly marked Tehran. The barrage is a raw display of military capacity, meant to deter further Israeli aggression by showing the painful price Israel would have to pay. While Israel's air defenses have performed remarkably well, the Iranian strategy highlights a key vulnerability. Even a small percentage of missiles getting through can cause significant damage and casualties. The attacks are a numbers game. Iran is testing the limits of Israel's defensive shield, forcing it to expend costly interceptor missiles while demonstrating its own vast arsenal. This war of attrition is less about technological superiority and more about strategic endurance and the willingness to absorb and inflict pain. It is a dangerous gambit that has fundamentally changed the calculus of power in the Middle East, proving that a direct confrontation is no longer a theoretical red line, but a present-day reality. Behind the strategic calculations and military posturing lies a devastating human tragedy that is rapidly unfolding across the region. In Iran, the Israeli airstrikes have exacted a heavy toll. According to recent reports, at least 657 people have been killed, a number that includes 263 civilians who were tragically caught in the crossfire. The strikes have not been limited to military sites. They have hit research facilities in Tehran and other urban areas, leaving over 2,000 people wounded. The loss of top military and nuclear personnel is a strategic blow to Iran, but the deaths of ordinary citizens are a stark reminder that modern warfare rarely spares the innocent, turning geopolitical conflicts into personal grief for countless families. In Israel, the constant rain of Iranian missiles and drones has brought the war home to its citizens in a way not seen in decades. While the death toll is lower, with at least 24 people killed and hundreds wounded, the entire country lives under a state of siege. The psychological toll of daily air raid sirens scrambling to shelters and the constant anxiety of a potential direct hit is immense. In Haifa, a missile strike that wounded 19 people shattered the city's sense of security. This reality underscores that even with one of the world's most advanced air defense systems, no nation is entirely immune. The conflict has pierced the veil of security and made fear a daily companion for millions. The violence has also tragically spilled over into Gaza, compounding an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis. In the weeks since the direct Israel-Iran war began, Israeli military operations in the Gaza Strip have intensified, leading to the deaths of over 400 Palestinians. One recent incident alone claimed 82 lives. These actions have pushed the total death toll in Gaza to a staggering 55,000 since the wider conflict began. For the people of Gaza, this new war is another layer of suffering on top of an existing nightmare, as they are caught between regional power struggles over which they have no control, paying the ultimate price for a conflict fought far from their homes. Furthermore, the targeting of nuclear facilities has introduced a terrifying new dimension to the conflict. The International Atomic Energy Agency has issued a stark warning about the acute danger of radiation and chemical leaks from Israeli attacks on Iran's Natanz facility. AEA Chief Rafael Grossi has cautioned that a direct hit on a nuclear power plant like Bushehr would be a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. This threat of a nuclear or radiological disaster adds a horrifying potential consequence to the ongoing military exchanges, where a miscalculation could lead to an environmental and human catastrophe that would affect the entire region and beyond for generations. The international response to this escalating crisis has been a tense mix of condemnation, calls for restraint, and strategic maneuvering, exposing deep divisions. The United States finds itself in a particularly precarious position. President Donald Trump is reportedly considering direct military involvement, specifically targeting Iran's heavily fortified Fordo nuclear facility. However, he has paused this decision for 2 weeks, creating a narrow and fragile window for diplomacy. This internal debate is complicated by a public disagreement between the president and his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, over whether Iran is actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, highlighting the uncertainty that is fueling this dangerous standoff. Israel, for its part, has maintained an unwavering and aggressive posture. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly declared that the military operation will continue for as long as it takes to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. This sentiment was echoed by Israel's UN envoy, who affirmed that the attacks will not cease until the perceived threat is neutralized. From Israel's perspective, this is an existential fight, and it is prepared to act unilaterally to ensure its security. This hardline stance leaves very little room for diplomatic off-ramps, suggesting that Israel is committed to seeing this conflict through to what it deems a successful conclusion, regardless of international pressure. Iran has responded with a combination of defiance and diplomacy. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has praised the Iranian people's resilience, framing the conflict as a test of national courage. On the diplomatic front, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that Tehran will not return to nuclear negotiations with the United States until Israeli aggression stops. At the United Nations, Iran's ambassador has focused on the heavy civilian toll of the Israeli strikes, appealing to the international community to intervene. Iran is attempting to walk a fine line, projecting strength through military retaliation while simultaneously positioning itself as the victim of aggression on the world stage. As the world watches, the risks of a wider regional war loom larger than ever. A miscalculation by either side, an Israeli strike that causes a radiological disaster, or an Iranian missile that evades defenses and causes mass casualties, could trigger an unstoppable chain reaction, potentially drawing in global powers. The immediate challenge is to pull both nations back from the brink, but the diplomatic channels are fraught with mistrust and competing agendas. The coming days are critical. The decisions made in Washington, Jerusalem, and Tehran will not only determine the fate of millions in the Middle East, but will also shape the landscape of global security for the foreseeable future.